Chapter 1. The Reluctant Witch. Kyle, a scrawny 12-year-old with a mop of sandy brown hair and a penchant for video games, wasn't thrilled about Halloween. Not this year, anyway. His friends, Mark and Sarah, were obsessed with scary costumes, while Kyle just wanted to stay home and play Mystical Realms. His mother, however, had other plans. Eleanor, with her mischievous glint in her warm brown eyes and a smile that could disarm a dragon, insisted he go out. "It's tradition, sweetie. Besides, you never know what magic the night might hold." This year, she'd outdone herself with his costume. A full-blown witch ensemble, not a scary wart-nosed hag, but a rather elegant, if slightly oversized sorceress. A flowing midnight blue velvet robe, shimmering with silver constellations, cascaded around his ankles. A pointy, wide-brimmed hat, adorned with a crescent moon charm, kept slipping over his eyes. His mom even insisted on a touch of glitter on his cheeks, which he begrudgingly allowed. "You look absolutely bewitching, Kyle," she chuckled, adjusting the hat for the 10th time. He felt ridiculous, a boy dressed as a witch, completely out of sync with his monster-clad friends. He met Mark, a Frankenstein's monster with green face paint already cracking, and Sarah, a surprisingly convincing vampire, at the end of his driveway. They snickered at his costume, but good-naturedly. "Nice dress, Kyle," Mark ribbed, elbowing him. Kyle just rolled his eyes. "It's a robe, and my mom made me." As they set off, the crisp autumn air bit at their exposed skin. The neighborhood was a cacophony of excited shrieks, rustling plastic, and distant laughter. Porch lights glowed, casting eerie shadows, and carved pumpkins grinned toothily from every step. Kyle tried to get into the spirit, forcing a smile when he shouted, "Trick or treat," and trying to not trip over his overly long robe. But a part of him still yearned for the quiet glow of his computer screen. The predictable world of his game where he was always in control. He didn't know that tonight, control would be the furthest thing from his grasp, and the magic his mother hinted at would be far more real and life-altering than any video game could ever conceive. The first few houses were a blur of candy and polite thank yous. His bucket was starting to feel heavy, but a growing sense of unease settled over him. His friends, usually boisterous, seemed quieter tonight, their conversation hushed and conspiratorial. He wondered if they were planning some prank he wasn't in on, or if he was just imagining things. He felt a strange pull, almost like an invisible string tugging him slightly off course from their path. He tried to ignore it, chalking it up to fatigue and the awkwardness of his costume. But the feeling persisted, a subtle current against the flow of his intent. Chapter 2. The Eerie Detour. The strange sensation intensified as they ventured deeper into a part of the neighborhood Kyle wasn't very familiar with. The houses grew older, their Victorian architecture shrouded in creeping ivy and skeletal tree branches. The streetlights here were dimmer, casting long, dancing shadows that played tricks on the eyes. Mark and Sarah, usually leading the charge, started to lag behind, their flashlights darting nervously. Kyle, despite his growing unease, found himself at the front, drawn by an invisible force. He turned to say something to his friends, to ask if they should turn back, but they were no longer right behind him. He stopped, peering into the gloom. "Mark? Sarah?" His voice, muffled by the witch hat, sounded thin and reedy. No answer. He spun around, a prickle of fear running down his spine. The street seemed empty, the other trick-or-treaters having vanished like ghosts. He called out again, louder this time, his heart starting to thump an anxious rhythm against his ribs. Panic began to creep in. He was alone. The street felt different now, hushed and still, as if the usual Halloween revelry had been sucked away, leaving only the rustle of dry leaves and the distant, mournful hoot of an owl. His witch robe, which had felt silly before, now seemed to hug him like a security blanket, offering little comfort. He tried to retrace his steps, but everything looked foreign in the dim light. Every house was just a dark, imposing silhouette. He felt a growing sense of disorientation, as if the familiar world had subtly shifted on its axis. He stumbled on an uneven patch of sidewalk, his hat falling over his eyes, momentarily blinding him. When he righted himself, he found himself standing directly in front of a house he'd never seen before. It wasn't just old. It was ancient, almost decrepit, yet held a strange, undeniable allure. The paint was peeling, the gables sagged, and thorny rosebushes clawed at the porch, but an almost imperceptible glow emanated from within. Despite the decaying facade, the windows seemed to shimmer with an inner light, like distant, watchful eyes. A sense of warmth, almost like a siren's call, emanated from the front door. A carved wooden sign, mostly obscured by ivy, hung crookedly beside the porch swing. He squinted, trying to make out the faded letters, but they blurred into an indecipherable script. A single pumpkin-shaped lantern flickered on the porch, casting dancing shadows that seemed to beckon him closer. A strange calmness settled over him, overriding the panic. It was as if this house was waiting for him. Against his better judgment, driven by a curiosity he couldn't explain and a strange sense of inevitability, he found himself walking up the creaking wooden steps. The porch planks groaned under his weight, echoing in the sudden silence of the night. His heart was still racing, but it was no longer solely from fear. It was mixed with a potent cocktail of apprehension and a peculiar excitement. He reached the heavy, ornate wooden door, its dark surface polished to a sheen, despite the age of the house, and with a hesitant hand, he raised the dragon-shaped knocker. He let it fall, the dull thud echoing eerily in the stillness, a sound that seemed to seal his fate. Chapter 3. The Witch at the Door. The wait for an answer felt interminable, stretching into an eternity of silence. Kyle stood frozen on the porch, his breath held tight in his chest, acutely aware of the chill in the air and the rapid drumming of his pulse. He was half expecting no one to answer, or perhaps a ghoulish figure fitting for Halloween. Instead, the heavy oak door swung inward with a soft, almost soundless sigh, revealing not a monster or a ghost, but a woman of breathtaking beauty. She was tall and slender, her presence commanding yet strangely gentle. Her hair, a cascade of midnight black, flowed around her shoulders like a silk curtain, framing a face of striking elegance. High cheekbones, full lips painted a deep berry red, and eyes the color of emeralds that seemed to hold ancient secrets. She wore a long, flowing gown of deep forest green velvet, adorned with intricate silver embroidery that sparkled subtly in the dim porch light. It was a gown that spoke of both power and grace, far more authentic than Kyle's own costume. A heavy silver pendant, shaped like an intertwining vine, rested at her throat, seeming to pulse with a faint, inner light. Kyle felt a blush creep up his neck, suddenly acutely aware of his own disheveled witch costume and the glitter on his cheeks. He stammered, "Trick or treat?" His voice barely a whisper. A soft, knowing smile played on the woman's lips. It was a smile that didn't mock, but rather held a deep understanding, as if she knew his every thought. "Well, hello there, little witch," she purred, her voice a melodic hum, like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "And what a delightful surprise you are." Her gaze, those mesmerizing green eyes, seemed to bore right into him, not unpleasantly, but as if reading the very core of his being. Kyle felt an odd sensation, as if a warm, gentle current was flowing through him, from his head to his toes. It wasn't uncomfortable, but entirely new and strangely comforting. She reached into a deep, velvety pocket hidden within her gown and withdrew a single, shimmering treat. It wasn't a standard candy bar or lollipop. It was a perfectly round, polished orb, glowing with an internal, pearlescent light. It looked like a tiny, edible moonstone. The surface swirled with faint, opalescent hues of pink, blue, and gold. Its scent, subtly sweet and floral, filled the air, intoxicating and inviting. She held it out to him on her open palm, her fingers long and elegant. "This isn't just any treat, little one," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "This is a gift that, when consumed, will grant your heart's deepest, most honest desire." Kyle stared at the shimmering orb, then back at her captivating face. He felt a jolt of something akin to recognition, as if he'd known her, or someone like her forever. He felt no fear, only an overwhelming pull to take the object, to taste the magic it promised. His deepest desire? He wasn't even sure what that was, not consciously anyway, but something within him, a nascent longing he hadn't articulated even to himself, stirred with potent force. With a trembling hand, he reached out and took the orb. It felt warm and surprisingly light in his palm, pulsing with a gentle energy that resonated deep within him. Chapter 4. The Sweet Transformation. The pearlescent orb felt smooth and ethereal in Kyle's hand, radiating a gentle warmth that quickly spread through his palm and up his arm. He looked at the beautiful witch, her emerald eyes still fixed on him, a subtle curve on her lips, a silent invitation. He felt a rush of adrenaline, a mix of apprehension and exhilarating curiosity. What was his deepest desire? He genuinely didn't know. He hadn't consciously wished for anything profound lately, beyond acing his math test or getting the latest video game. But there was a persistent, unspoken yearning in his heart, a quiet dissatisfaction with himself he couldn't quite place. He'd always felt a bit out of sync, a little awkward in his own skin, never quite fitting into the rough-and-tumble world of boys his age. He often found himself more comfortable in the company of girls, or lost in the imaginative worlds of books and games. He wondered, briefly, if this orb could change that. With a gulp, he popped the glowing orb into his mouth. It wasn't hard like a candy. It was soft and dissolved almost instantly on his tongue, releasing a burst of flavor unlike anything he'd ever tasted. It was sweet, like honey and berries, but also subtly spicy, like cinnamon and ginger, with a surprising, refreshing hint of mint. As the flavor washed over him, a tingling sensation began. It started in his mouth, a fizzing effervescence that spread rapidly down his throat and into his chest. It felt like tiny, shimmering needles pricking gently beneath his skin, then expanding, warming, and softening. He gasped, dropping his candy bucket with a clatter, the sound strangely distant. The witch watched him, her smile widening slightly, her eyes twinkling with amusement and satisfaction. The tingling intensified, becoming a pervasive hum that vibrated through every cell of his body. His vision blurred for a moment, then sharpened, colors appearing more vibrant, the air feeling crisper. He felt a sudden lightness, as if an invisible weight had been lifted. The first obvious change was his skin. He watched in awe and a little horror as the rough, boyish texture of his hands began to smooth and soften, becoming impossibly delicate. His knuckles, once prominent, refined into gentle curves, and his fingernails seemed to lengthen and strengthen, taking on a subtle sheen. A faint, peachy flush bloomed across the backs of his hands. He felt a strange stretching sensation in his spine, as if he was simultaneously growing taller and shrinking. He was indeed shrinking, subtly losing a few inches, making him feel more delicate, less gangly. Then came the more profound changes. A sudden, intense pressure bloomed in his chest, almost painful for a fleeting moment, then softening into a profound warmth. He looked down and saw, to his utter astonishment, that his flat chest was beginning to swell, growing rounded and full. His witch robe, once too large, now stretched taut across his new, burgeoning breasts. He felt a corresponding shift in his hips, a widening, a softening, as his boyish frame began to curve and reshape itself into a distinctly feminine form. A wave of heat washed over him, making him feel both vulnerable and strangely exhilarated. He reached up, his newly delicate fingers touching his face. His jawline, once angular, was softening, his cheeks becoming fuller, his chin more pointed. His lips, he felt, were plumping, and his nose seemed to shrink ever so slightly. He tried to speak, to cry out, but his voice came out as a reedy, unfamiliar squeak, much higher in pitch than he was used to. It was a girl's voice. A wave of dizziness washed over him, and he instinctively grabbed the porch railing for support. He looked at his hands again, truly seeing them, smaller, daintier, with longer, slender fingers. He noticed a faint, pearly shimmer to his new skin. He was no longer Kyle. He was a girl. His heart pounded, not with fear, but with a complex mix of shock, wonder, and a nascent, unbelievable joy. The witch at the door simply smiled, a knowing, triumphant expression on her face. "Welcome, little one," she whispered, her voice like a caress. "Welcome to yourself."
Don't stop now. See what happens next. Subscribe for more every week. Hit the bell and stay part of the story.